I don't know what kind of superpower I have today, but I literally stood up and this room just got so quiet. Thank you for making that easy for me. Just wanted to welcome you here. We've got, my name is Julianne Threlfall. I'm one of the co-chairs here on WAVE, and I'm going to turn it over to two of our colleagues, Maria and Echo, who are going to open up our evening this evening. So I'll ask them to come on up here, and we're about to get started.
I think we're good. We're good. Great. Good evening, everyone. The Women's Advisory Voice of Edmonton, WAVE, acknowledges the traditional land on which we reside is in Treaty 6 territory. WAVE would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for generations, such as the Nehiyaw, Cree, Dene, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Nakota Iska, Nakota Sioux, and Niitsitapi Blackfoot peoples. WAVE also acknowledges this as the Métis homeland and home of one of the largest communities of the Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It's a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share Edmonton as a home. Together, we call upon all of our collective, honor traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and future generations. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria George. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the co-chair of WAVE's project subcommittee. As we start today's inspiring event, we wanted to provide some insight on WAVE and its history. Since its inception in 2014, WAVE has been an influential committee to Edmonton City Council. WAVE's name was initially created from the voices of over 300 women. With a shared vision for positive change, for Edmonton to be an equitable and inclusive city, the metaphor of waves symbolizes the ripple effect of women and gender diverse peoples using their voices to advocate for change. This has been a driving force behind WAVE's mission. I personally joined WAVE because I felt the most fulfilled when I was connected in my communities as a student, as a woman of color, and an immigrant, and I wanted to contribute to connecting underrepresented communities in the city that I grew up in. I'd now like to hand it over to Echo to tell you more about how Equity in Motion supports women and gender diverse people in their community.
Hello, everyone. My name is Echo Kaiser, and I use they, he pronouns, and I sit on the project subcommittee on WAVE. Advisory roles have a transformative potential to push boundaries for change. For almost a decade, WAVE has firmly established itself as a valued and influential voice, bringing crucial perspectives directly to City Council and supporting women and gender diverse people in Edmonton. Through events like this, we strive to create waves in the community, as our name suggests, very clever. It follows well that Equity in Motion is part of this change to encourage a gender equitable city by recognizing barriers, promoting opportunities for contribution, and respect for all. Growing up, I never saw people like myself in media or position of power, and so this is why it's so important for young women and gender diverse people so they can feel empowered to instill positive change in their communities. When women and gender diverse people are uplifted, we all are. This is one of the driving forces for joined WAVE, to be a voice for those who usually go unheard. With all that said, we welcome you all to our final episode of Equity in Motion, which focuses on community and culture. So now I'm just going to introduce Councillor Karen Tang. Councillor Karen Tang is a public health advocate, community organizer, city builder, and mom. She merges her background in public health, community development, human-centered design, and the social determinants of health, and is a firm believer in the power of peer-to-peer, neighborhood-to-neighborhood networks. She has experience working in public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and has worked with diverse communities and families. Karen is passionate about using participatory engagement to bring community perspectives to life and collaborating with racialized and ethnocultural communities in civic engagement and health promotion. Prior to being elected, Karen worked with the City of Edmonton on urban wellness and with the McConnell Foundation and partners across the country on building more participatory ecosystems.
But wait, there's more. We needed two people to finish talking about everything Karen does for our community. Okay, well, with that, I'd like to welcome Councillor Karen Tang onto the stage.
Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be included as part of this event. And kind of knowing the speakers and knowing WAVE over the years, I actually really struggle to consider, what are some of the things I really want to talk about in my opening. So they might just be stories and perhaps non sequitur, but there's a connection that I just want to share with you. And so my name is Karen Tang, and I represent Southeast Ward of Gatineau. That includes Mill Woods, Orchards, Ellerslie, and goes all the way to Beaumont. Gatineau is a word in the Mohawk language. Does anyone know what it means? It means big, tall forest. And as some of you may know, in 2021, ward names in the city changed, led by a group of indigenous women. It changed to all indigenous names in different languages. And I think incorporating and normalizing indigenous languages in our day-to-day is actually an incredible and an important step in reconciliation. As Lana and I were just chatting earlier, March this month is actually the 10th anniversary for the 7th Truth and Reconciliation Tour that took place in Edmonton, and there was a recognition event today, and actually that's where I got this shirt 10 years ago at an event when I went to the conference, so I want to give acknowledgement to that. And when I was thinking about this theme of diverse culture or community culture in arts and equity, I think about the ward name system. When community members can see themselves reflected in the city, both in small and big ways, whether it's names of ward, names of streets, names of neighborhoods, or in public art projects, all of which I think contributes positively to city building. And when I was graduating from the School of Public Health, at the time, I was kind of, reaching out to lots of different people, wanting to figure out what do I want to do with my life. And one person I reached out to was Yvonne Chu over at the Multicultural Health Brokers. And over the years, Yvonne has become a dear friend and a mentor. But at the time, I cold emailed her and was like, hey, we'd love to get to know you. This is my resume. I'm just graduating from public health. Can we chat? And so one day, I did go, and she welcomed me into the Multicultural Health Broker space. And then she brought out a tea set, a beautiful tea set. And we were just going to have tea. And I was looking around the space, and there was just artwork all over the room, and the tea set was beautiful. I don't know which country it came from, but as you know, multicultural health brokers are an incredibly diverse group of people, largely women, doing absolutely grassroots critical work. And then she said, yes, here we value beautiful things, and beauty is a very core aspect of the things we do. And I think over the years, I've seen that core tenet of beauty, of culture, so rooted in these women, in the way they carry themselves in the world, and when they build intercultural connections, when they serve communities. And I've learned that, as part of that culture or cultural brokering, which is what they consider what they do on a day-to-day basis, it's a critical means for and bridging relationships, which I think as the world gets more polarized and more divisive, I think those principles and the way of how we operate in this world becomes incredibly important. And certainly I think as an institution with the city of Edmonton, we work with the various arts communities to make sure that equity is embedded in all the work we do, whether that's strategy or projects on the ground. The Arts Council, we have the 10-year plan, and I think equity is very much part of that. And over the years, we've seen such a growth and blossoming of community projects where such diversity of people and communities are represented, and I'm so proud of the city's growth in that area. And I guess I just want to share maybe a quote that I've been thinking a lot about. And if someone, I helped to moderate a panel back in February during a Lunar New Year event. Some of you may have been there. I don't know if you've been to the Dragon Fried Rice. Okay, one person, good. Okay, so everyone else wouldn't have heard it. It was actually an art exhibit featuring a number of local Asian artists, the Asian diasporic artists in Edmonton, and the work they do, their identity and their storytelling. And the panel was kind of centered around this question that I raised to the artists themselves about how they interpret this terminology called diasporic gaze. And this is Wu Wang, who's a director of, oh my gosh, it's escaping me, but she's done so many really interesting films, really well known. But she said, she's a film director, and she said, the diasporic gaze is a gaze that challenges what we know, or rather what we think we know. That is the role of not just diasporic storytellers, but all storytellers, to tell stories that transcend the boundaries of nationalism, race, religion, language, without negating the specificities that make each of us who we are. And I think about that a lot, how we each tell our own story that is so absolutely unique, that can transcend, but we're not compromising who we are, or that unique story. To me, that's how this theme actually really resonated with me. And to me, that's what city building, that's collective city building, but through our unique storytelling, can come together. And that day I was the moderator, so I was asking questions to the artists themselves, and who shared their responses. And I think about it in my own context as a woman in politics, and how my own unique stories, I think, certainly a lot of those, I think, identity factors. However, I think I bring some unique perspective to this role of being in politics. And I was asked to comment a little bit about my experience as a racialized woman in local politics. And I think it's possibly one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had. It's by far the hardest thing I've ever done. But it's also, absolutely the most rewarding job I've ever had. And I'm so incredibly proud of being on a council with a historic number of women, in that role, of having the most number of racialized people in those positions. So we have also some of the youngest parents, on council, and we all come from such different, diverse professional backgrounds. Yeah, thank you. Yet, at the same time, I also think if you look out to the commentary and the way I think this council is discussed or perceived in the public, by the media, by various groups of people, there is an absolute tenor of racism and sexism that envelopes all of it. For me, in my role, I've come to realize that as one of two first racialized women, not only do I have to think about my actions and the things that I want to do and how that affects my reputation in the political sphere, I also have to be very mindful of other people's action and how they carry themselves in this world. And even though I have no control over things by people who may look like me, all of those factors absolutely affect my reputation. And if you want to know what I mean by that, you can ask me later about it. But I just realized that is something none of my council colleagues can truly relate, because that's something that they don't have to think about, how somebody else might do something that actually affect how people perceive me, even though I have nothing to do with it. And I guess to me, it also, it's been incredibly eye-opening for the last 2.5 years being in this role. Absolutely eye-opening. I've realized that nothing is what it seems on the outside. I've learned that power continues to rest within old boys clubs, despite the progress that we think we have made if we look at sort of the makeup of this council. And sometimes it's not just all boys, sometimes they're not all old, and sometimes they're not all white either. And the layers of I think, those layers of institutional oppression, I think sometimes is so invisible, it's hard to tease them out and hard to put your finger on it. And I realize that when we if we truly want to make progress in this space of representation, what we not only have to change is the face of those who are in those political roles, but it's also the face of everywhere that we have these clubs. The clubs have to change in order for progress to truly take hold. And I think all of you in this room, the fact that you're here, the fact that you are so active in your city, I think speaks wonders to that power and gives me a lot of hope for how these clubs can change in the near future. And, you know, I was telling these ladies that I actually thought preparing for a keynote for this panel was really hard, and I was just gonna, my secret to kind of preparing notes is actually read other people's quotes. So I'll just end my opening here by sharing a little bit. This is, is anyone familiar with Jay Pitter? A few people, yeah. Jay Pitter, she's a an urbanist based in Toronto, but does some amazing work in around urban planning, working in equity space, working with equity deserving communities, and she wrote this. I think the day after Olivia Chow won the mayoral race, and it deeply resonated with me, and I think about this all the time. Because it's really around kind of two women who have who's been first at something, right? And I certainly feel that, and I think Olivia was also the first female mayor, first racialized mayor. There's a certain level of expectation, and so she talks about how can we be supportive as a community. So I'll just read the quote. It's a bit long, so please bear with me. She says, "Let's celebrate her being the first racialized woman mayor, but never exclude her credentials. Her story and values are likely largely informed by her identity, but make no mistake, her win was a result of intellect, hard work, and the ability to imagine the almost unimaginable. Let's give her a bit of time to onboard and begin to make changes. John Tory had an entire decade to damn near destroy the city. Don't expect Olivia Chow to repair the damage by the end of the summer." I think about that a lot. This kind of expectation is how racism and patriarchy play out in institutions. Let's give her space to make decisions that we as racialized individuals and/or women would beyond these social identities. Let's not assume that she'll be more nurturing or an expert on every equity-related city building issue. Let's not, okay, actually, I'll go to the next one. Let's hold her accountable and respectfully disagree with her. Audre Lorde said, "It's not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." I will add deliberate and resolve to the list because differences are challenging. And so I think about, what does it look like for that support, and kind of bringing back to this notion of how do we make sure our stories transcend certain boundaries, yet we don't compromise those uniqueness. And I guess this is kind of how I think about that dynamic in my role, and my interaction kind of with the broader community. And with that, I'm really excited to hear what our panelists have to say on this topic that it took me a long time to wrap my head around, and I'm really excited to hear your insights. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. Just appreciate that you opened with storytelling, because isn't that what this is all about here today, in terms of both bringing community leaders together, thought leaders together, and just really excited to start this panel. And I'm very excited to introduce our panelists to you all here today. So thank you once again from WAVE on behalf of our co-chairs, Ariza at the back there, and myself, Julianne. Very excited to have you here today in what is coined the final episode, but to be continued, I hope. And we're very excited to have you here today to speak on this community arts and culture piece. So with that, Right next to me here, I have Linda Huang. Linda is an Alberta-based social media strategist and well-known content creator and blogger who regularly writes about food, travel, and lifestyle topics. If you don't follow her on Instagram, this is my personal plug, you must. I get so many hot tips about what's happening in Edmonton through Linda's Instagram. She is often exploring food, art, and events in the city, shares recommendations for audiences to do the same. She's the founder of Edmonton International Cat Festival, which has been celebrating cats, cat culture, and cat people, and raising money for cat rescue since 2014. She leads art and food tours in the city and believes social media is a powerful tool to help bolster arts, culture, and community. Linda is also the founder of Stop Race-Based Hate, a free online anti-racism education tool. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
And moving right along, Rochelle Ignacio. Rochelle is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for Tamarack Institute for Community Engagement, a learning institute focused on solving major community challenges, including ending poverty, building youth futures, building belonging, and addressing climate change. These are big topics all by themselves. Rochelle brings a diverse range of experiences with her to her work, including a Bachelor of Science in Human Ecology, an occupational health and safety certificate, growing up in rural Alberta, and work experience across a broad range of sectors and roles. Rochelle has also committed herself to community organizing by creating opportunities for Black mobility and belonging through projects such as Feed the Soul Dining Week, which put a spotlight on Edmonton's Black-owned food and beverage businesses, and the former Black-owned Market Edmonton, which created economic opportunities for Black business owners. In her spare time, if she has any, Rochelle loves to indulge in international travel, snowboard, camp, connect with friends and family over food, and spend time with her cat, Marlo. Rochelle is the recipient of CIBWE's Top 100 Black Women to Watch in Canada 2022, Edify Magazine's Top 40 Under 40 Award 2021, as well as the African Caribbean Community Leader of the Year Award 2020. Give it up for Rochelle. And closing out this star-studded cast, we have Lana Whiskey Jack. Lana has been described as a visual storyteller, scholar, artist, and arts actionist. She is a multidisciplinary artist, scholar, and author from Saddle Lake Cree First Nation in Treaty 6, Alberta, and is now based in Amiskwachees, Waskahigan, Edmonton. Lana received her art and design diploma from Red Deer College before moving to Ottawa with her family to earn her Bachelor of Arts and a Master in Arts degrees in Canadian Studies. Her education continued with a doctorate degree at the University Blue Quills, where she also taught for over 12 years. She is currently an associate professor in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at the Faculty of Arts at the University of Alberta, and co-founder of, forgive me, I'm gonna get it, and this is part of my reconciliation journey, Ogamau,
Kihau Meekwinak. Good.
Indigenous Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays, and is a co-owner of the Whiskey Jack Art House located in Edmonton. Her current research project explores ancestral wisdom and issues around the theme of reconnecting to the spirit of Nahuiwen,
Yes.
Cree language, Nahawai, Nahuau, gender worldviews, and the Iskwau, women, body relation to the cosmic and earth within 13 moon teachings through arts-based practices. She is featured in a documentary about confronting and transcending historical trauma through her arts-based practice titled Lana Gets Her Talk. Welcome, Lana. Thank you. I'm sorry. And so with that, when we talk about storytelling, when we talk about bringing community together, when we talk about building that strong sense of community here in Edmonton, what are the key elements that contribute to fostering that community? And maybe I'll start with you, Linda.
Thank you. Great question. First time I'm hearing it. I would like to answer this, I think, in two parts. So fostering community, to me, I feel like one is what each and every one of you are already doing, and we kind of mentioned this in our casual chat, is just to show up to things that are happening in your community. And I think it's understated that impact that one person showing up to something has. Like, I'm sure all the organizers here were like, yay, you're here. yeah, so doing that and doing it consistently, and of course, you can't show up to everything all the time, and maybe not everything is going to fit for you, but just being more intentional about that. So in general, I think in life, I'm trying to be more intentional about showing up into spaces that maybe I'm also not super comfortable in, or that I've never experienced before, but that I don't want that to stop me. And then the second way I think to foster that community is to try and create something. And when I say that, I mean that I believe that every single one of us has something that we like and that we like to do, and that there's probably a lot of people in your community who like it as well. So I'll use the Cat Festival as my example. Is 10 years ago, I started that because I like cats. I have 3 now. We just added 1 last year. Yeah, total cat lady, but I was just thinking, I love this city and I love going to events. Why don't I create an event? And what event would I create? And literally I was like, well, I like cats. Is there anything about cats in the city? And it really started that simply. And it turned out, there's this actually shared experience where lots of other people around me also like the same thing I do. And it was, I think, a surprise for me with the first time we had that event. I didn't know how many people were going to show up, and we got like 600 people showed up to this cat. Literally, we were just like watching cat videos in a theater.
I love it.
And there were some vendors selling cat things, and 600 people showed up. And I remember my husband, he's very supportive of me, but he was like, wow. he was like very surprised. And then it's grown gradually over the years. But it's as such a small idea as that what is the thing that I like that other people might also like, and we raise money. So it's not just a party for cat people and cat culture, which it is, but we also raise money for cat rescues. So it's like, what's that extra layer that we can kind of give back to the community too? So I think that we're all capable of something like that, in whether it's the work that we're doing professionally or just like our personal hobby. So those are sort of my 2 easy ways to foster community in Edmonton.
I love it. And I like seeing a passion turn into a project, but that doesn't feel like a project.
Yeah.
Right?
Some days.
Fair. We can talk more about that, I'm sure. Rochelle, I'm going to turn it over to you. Same question. In terms of key elements, is there anything you wanted to add on to or also include in this question?
Yeah, thanks for having me and showing up, everyone, first of all. I always like to just acknowledge that, like Linda said, we are in community together right now. So even if we don't form bonds that exist beyond these doors as we leave, right now we're in a community space together. And like Linda, when I throw events, I have that same fear of, oh my gosh, is anyone gonna come? Most times people do. But the first event I ever held was Black Bone Market in Edmonton, and right before it was like the pandemic, everyone was shutting down events. And I was like, this is wild, we can't do this, like we're gonna be a super spreader. But everyone was waiting outside and 1,000 people showed up to support the Black community. So that's what I think is really fosters community here in Edmonton. Feed the Soul is built on community collaboration and culture. And I think what I think about community, like the people in Edmonton, we are a diverse and growing city. We are like the festival city. We love to show up and try new things. A lot of what Linda had touched on, from the collaboration standpoint, I see people collaborating on so many different events. Even thinking back to Feed the Soul this February, Linda and I were able to do a walking food tour and hit 3, we called it the Downtown Caribbean Trail. But we went to Cafe Caribbean, Island Vibes, and Lloyd's Patty Distro, and just had a really good time with this small community that came out to that event. We see people collaborating across sectors. We see people merging different events. And so I think that Edmonton just really wants to get involved and be seen and figure out ways that they can have representation across different spectrums, different events. I'm not going to speak too much about the culture piece, but I wanted to talk about innovation, because I think that Edmonton is an innovative city. We, from a business standpoint, we have a lot of startup businesses. They don't always stay here in Edmonton, but it's something that I always like to promote, is that we're the city of starters. Even when we travel, when I travel and I see different events, I'm like, how can I bring that back here? And now that I'm a community organizer and I produce events, when I go to events, everyone's like enjoying the music and I'm like counting the number of speakers and looking at all the behind the scenes that's going on. But just thinking about how we can make something that doesn't exist here. Make something that fits for Edmonton. Maybe it's not going to fit somewhere else, but I just think that we're always just like trying to break those bounds. Seeing what's happening even in the downtown with like the tech atmosphere and the way they animate the city. We have tech heroes like, yeah, Leah. But yeah, I think we're trying to like figure out ways like how could AI leverage what we're trying to build? How can we like work with artists, bring in different like dancers or like have diverse food offerings at our events? So we're just always trying to like push those bounds and do something new.
I love that. Thank you, Rochelle. And Lana, I'm looking at you, and I'd love for you to close out this question for us. Any key elements when we talk about fostering that strong sense of community here in Edmonton that strike or highlight for you?
Yeah. When you were mentioning representation, I think of just the body, like how does the body interact with the space in our first, especially for those who are able to see the visual representation is really an important element to know that, you know, seeing a pride flag or, you know, on the sidewalk, seeing, you know, our beautiful colors of our medicine wheels or those cultural symbolism that really show, you know, especially as a Nehio, for part being of this land, that we exist, we are represented in these spaces, we belong, right? And if for so long when we didn't have those kind of representations. So having a very strong element, a visual element of belonging is really important. You know, that invitation, that you know, you're welcome here is really important. Visual communication of inviting community. And I think also, well, that and accessibility, right? Where our communities of care and safety, where we can access those spaces to collaborate, to share the food, the songs, the stories, and dance and move in a way that we all can speak sometimes without words, right? And I think that's so much of Edmonton has that spirit of coming together and celebrating and needing those spaces, public spaces, to celebrate our diversity and inclusion of our incredible diverse communities. So.
Don't disagree there. That sense of belonging is something that I felt was a theme for all of you. Finding your belonging, whether it's a cat festival or seeing yourself represented, is so important. Lana, I'm going to come to you with this question first, so you're not off the hot seat yet. How does art inform culture? Or does culture inform art?
It's definitely symbiotic, right? As a visual storyteller, everything, and to me, like painting or the visual communication is one of my first ways of communicating before I even, it's what I always say makes me smarter, right? I'm like, before I can process anything in a good way, because I want to leave that medicine of support rather than medicines of harm through our words, through our visual language, is that it comes from culture, right? That cultural view of being able to communicate. And art is, you know, that representation of where someone comes from, where they, what language they speak, you know, where they belong in community is such an important one. So as a visual, you know, a scholar artist, where I use art within my classrooms to be able for people to position themselves. You know, what's your self-location? Where are you from? Where do you come from? Who are you? Those really important questions that actually, that's our protocols of within our Cree community, is we always ask, who are you? Where do you come from? Where do you belong? Where's your belly button connections to? And the importance of that is not so much to distinguish or to separate, but actually to fill in where can I fit in my relationship to you, or vice versa. Where can you fit in my world and in my kinship in those spaces in my life? So art and culture is there. There is no word in Cree, and actually most Indigenous languages for art. There's no word for culture, right? But what it is, and you mentioned that, is beauty. The closest word we can find for art is beauty, is to think in beauty, talk in beauty, walk in beauty, and share in beauty. And so that is a culture, right? That's a process.
Immediately, I want to say beautiful. And I thank you for that. Rochelle, to you, what forms of art can impact community culture?
All of them, really. I think when I think about what's happening in the Black community is that I'm seeing that artistic forms of cultural expression are just a way of life. It's not something that we do to animate a space. My dad's sitting here, but my parents are both from Trinidad, and we have something called Carnival, something that I need to go to, the real version, one year. But a lot of those bands that you see on the road are like a resistance to colonialization. They're a resistance to white supremacy, and so some there's the one, I forget what it's called. The one that they paint themselves in oil in the black. What is it? Jab Jab. So, I used to be scared of that when I was younger, but then I followed this account called Know Your Caribbean, and I'm starting to learn about how there's this evolution and how it's not just like this parade where you see people dancing, drinking rum, and having the greatest time, but it's actually a way that we're celebrating and continuing the legacy of our culture. And I see, I think of drumming, I think of singing. I'm wearing earrings from Buno Design. There's so many ways to express ourselves artistically. And even Africa Center, they just did this Black Girls Who Crochet Club. And I really wanted to go, but I was out of town. But these girls maybe never learned how to crochet, but they're just trying to be expressive and form community with one another, try something new. Who cares what it turns out and looks like at the end? They're just trying to, form those bonds. So I think it's such a broad question because I see that there's art in so much that it's hard to pinpoint and say that art exists here, here, and here.
Absolutely. So as you were talking about that, I don't think I even realized that I was doing it, but because I'm very online, I've started following, there's people now our age and maybe a little older who are doing skits about what it means to be Vietnamese. And I've just started, and you follow one, you see it, and you'll see another one, and another one. Now I'm following dozens of these Vietnamese comedians, and they're not professional comedians, but they're doing all these skits, and they're talking about this is what a Vietnamese mother would do if you're late for school. And I'm oh my God, that is what a Vietnamese mother would do. And I just think that that's so cool, is that this cultural piece that I think I thought was a very individual thing is actually, again, this very shared experience that tons of people have, and then thanks to social media and technology, we're kind of fostering that even more. Because these counts are so accessible, I am now more, not that I wasn't excited before about learning a Vietnamese cultural thing, but now it's I'm really excited because I want to see what the next skit is or how they're going to break down what this term is. So I think that that's cool that there's kind of that art in just these people's bedrooms that they're now able to broadcast out to everyone who also have this shared experience. Yeah.
And I think, Rochelle, you mentioned it, what is art? And then there's no word for this in Indigenous language, but that it's beauty and that we're finding it in all these new spaces. And I think we're going to touch a bit on social media a little later, but I appreciate that it ebbs and flows and that there's more and more of it every time we turn a corner. And that's beautiful. I'm going to turn to you, Linda, so you're going to hold the mic here still a little bit longer. In what ways can arts, culture, initiatives play a role in shaping identity and cohesion in Edmonton's communities?
I think that, I think Rochelle mentioned that we're sort of that festival city. I think the city did a good job of that marketing campaign years ago. But I think that, there's the festivals that everyone sort of knows, and then there are, you know, I would consider like things that Rochelle is doing, like Feed the Soul, Black-owned dining week, like this festival of Black restaurants or Black businesses. And for a lot of people, I think in Edmonton, myself included, like I didn't know that restaurant existed. And it's not like I'm going out of my way not to support a Black-owned restaurant. It's just like that just wasn't top of mind for whatever reason. So when we have, I think, people in Edmonton creating these spaces that allow the broader community to kind of participate, I think that all becomes part of who Edmonton is that, and you were saying something earlier, I forget, but it made me think about how I've said before is that I feel like people in Edmonton are really eager to support you. They're just kind of like some people are waiting for the thing to support, and then some people are creating the thing that others will support. And I think that all plays into this identity, is that when we become the creators or we become the supporters, then that is who Edmonton is where we want. I think there's like a hunger for that, whether we're creating or supporting it. And I think that's a very, I think it inspires me to want to do more things and go to more things and support it that way. But I think like each of these little pockets of communities and spaces and festivals and whatever that is Edmonton. To me, like it's all of these little things all together is Edmonton.
I love it. Anything to add, Rochelle?
Yeah, so much to add actually to this one. Who here has noticed that Edmonton is just like busier lately? Okay, a few people. I think that we're seeing like a huge demographic shift in Edmonton right now, and it's pushing us to think about what spaces we're creating and who we're creating spaces for. So just a little bit of like data. Alberta is has the third largest Black population outside of Ontario and Quebec, which is shocking to some people when I say that fact. And it's also one of the youngest and fastest growing Black populations in Canada. I know the spaces that I'm in, there's like a huge Nigerian presence, and so that's shaping like the music that we're listening to, even in mainstream, like Afrobeats, for instance. So just by way of like who exists within Edmonton, the demographic of our communities, shifts the type of events that we're going to see. No offense to like the like Heritage Days or any of those, but there's this opportunity to create spaces that are built for our community, and at the same time invite the broader community into those spaces. And that's really what we try to do with Feed the Soul, is open the doors of the Black food community for those like holes in the wall where you're like, every time I look in there, I'm not sure if I should go in, but really to have the business owners open the doors and say like, come in and let me like show you how to eat with injera or ugali, or tell you about the history of different cuisines. So I think Edmontonians really want that opportunity to interact and experience different cultures. But sometimes we just need the creators to make the opportunity, but we also need the community to show up. Yeah.
So we talk about community showing up, and we talk about creating these pockets, and that like starting to attract like an event comes up, and then we're talking about all these events coming up. And maybe Lana, just to round out the question in terms of this cohesion and continuing to support this community as creators and looking out to this audience, any calls to action, any things that we can do to continue to support things like Feed the Soul and other great initiatives?
Absolutely. I think about, I attended the event at Panelists building, and it was great. I remember sitting there and looking at, our mayor and this incredible, in this beautiful social innovation space of people coming together and celebrating the diversity. And I think that's definitely something I would love to see more, is the collaboration between our different communities, as you mentioned, like coming together. There's a lot of feedback. And having our, especially our leadership and governance and other businesses opening spaces for one another, and especially for those who don't have the resources. There's so many opportunities for, making spaces a little more inclusive and diverse by putting up, some kind of, sometimes it's a sticker, sometimes it's playing, different music and going into different businesses, or, having those different colors. the front of your business, and having those kind of pop-up opportunities. Like they're economic, to have a pop-up food, and to definitely having our community leadership present to invite those kind of conversations, and sometimes making points and saying, come and talk to me later, right? Or having those Cree words and people, I don't know how to say those words. So come and, there is always those different opportunities to go and visit. Something, this is our generations don't do as much of, right? Is going to have those spaces to visit, and definitely would love to have more of those kind of opportunities. But it is about showing up, coming, and just challenging yourself to try something new, whether it's food, music, trying on clothes, buying some beaded bling, showing that you are an ally, a relative, that you are open to extending your kinship by having those kind of conversations.
There's also the Cree language classes at the library.
Cree language classes, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Noted. There's also Cree language Instagram accounts.
Yes.
We're hitting all the platforms. We talked about showing up, and we talked about you folks showing up here today. I have a lot of questions, and I could entertain this whole room, but I want to turn it over to you folks in the audience. If there's any questions for our panelists, I'm going to do a pop-up right now. Scan the room, and if not, I'll carry on. Yeah, in the back. Thanks, Sarisa.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about how community members can show up. Oh, all right, hello there. So there's been a lot of discussion about how community members can show up for the community. What are your thoughts on businesses or entities showing up back for the community? What can they do?
I can start. Is this mic working still?
Yeah, you're loud.
Yeah? Okay. The feedback went away, which is great. I think that, again, like speaking back to collaboration, Central Social Hall is someone that has been supporting my initiative since I started, through sponsoring, giving gift cards, and then opening their doors to host different events on their patio. So that's one small way. I also think about, I know budgets are tight for everyone, but finding ways to sponsor, even if it is like that gift card, finding ways that you're having representation within the spaces that you have in the workplace. What speakers are you inviting? Do you have an opportunity to bring an artist or a poet, or who are you even like hiring within the spaces that exist? So it could be like a voiceover artist. It could be, like a hand model. I don't know. You're into feet.
It's a feat?
Your feet model.
It's not on record. No, you go.
Yeah, I just think like businesses need to think about how they're cultivating arts and culture within their spaces. We even talked about having art like visually represented within the walls. So I think there's so many opportunities. It just has to be a business that's willing to invest into that arts and culture community.
For me, I think, so this is actually a topic that I worked with a business on. They wanted to figure out how best to incorporate diversity and inclusion in their social media marketing. And then what we ended up finding out is that they don't really do any type of diversity or inclusion for their own staff or for their own business. And so it was a very well, this is a great meeting, but I think this is like a meeting that needs to happen maybe after you've done this, this, and this internally. So there's that. So kind of reflecting internally and being like, well, do we have staff that celebrate Holi, I think just happened, and Lunar New Year? So it's like, but what are you doing anything for them? So treating your people, I think, in a more inclusive way before you even try to, in a way, it's kind of performative, I think, if the internal is not there. And then I do want to shout out to Kyla is here, for instance, and Kyla owns several businesses in Edmonton, and I think she does such an amazing job collaborating with other business owners and also people and organizations. So she's helping support something with Cat Festival, and when they opened Foo's Repair Shop, which is amazing, you should go to it, they made sure that they hired people or chefs from Chinatown to come and make the food really authentic. So there's like partnerships there that you can, and I think it just can just be natural, right? And even with the Cat Festival, it's not like we ever put, you know, we want to donate to your rescue and we want to make sure that we're inclusive. We're just, while we're going through applications for who we're going to donate to, we're thinking, wow, hey, there's animal rescue on a reserve. That's really cool and important, and actually I don't think they get any attention or people don't really know about that. Maybe that's just even in the discussion that comes up. So I think it can be more natural too, but yeah, lots of ways to just integrate, I think, but making sure that you're also walking, walking the walk. Yeah.
Good point. Like paying your artist.
Yes.
A lot of
At the bare minimum.
artists will show it for free, but artists need to continue doing art and they need to be paid.
Say that louder for the back. Right?
Yeah. Artists need to be paid.
100%. Okay. Anything else you wanted to add, Lana, on that piece?
Those are great. I
Yeah.
got my pen so I could take notes.
I think paying people is,
top of the list.
Just on the payment part, though, Nisha Patel, who is one of our poet laureates, she was speaking about how artists, like if we were to have a basic guaranteed income, artists could then just create, and how much better would our city be? Yes. Those are for Nisha. But I just think it's such a unique concept to think that an artist doesn't have to like be hustling in this gig economy. They don't have to worry about this full-time job, but they can be contributing to like our well-being. We were talking a lot about care, and I think that artists really care for the community by creating.
I want to finish with that because that's great, and it's a good piece to think about when we're talking about artists and the art and the work that is involved in art. The effort involved in art. Linda, I'm going to come to you with this next one. How can our community uplift underrepresented groups through this art and culture?
I feel like we kind of have touched on it. So it's things like, you know, well, I was thinking about food. That's not art and culture. I'm always thinking about food. But no, it's just thinking about, it's not going to be, maybe it's not the first or obvious sort of choice. But it's not even, because I feel like the argument is always, well, if we're trying to be more diverse, you know, you're snubbing people that are qualified just because they might not be maybe a person of color in an underrepresented group. But it's not that. It's just that we've never really given this thought and attention first to this, and of course they should be qualified as well. But I think it's, who can we hire? That's not the obvious person that is always getting hired. And I even think like, oh, there's a period of time there where I was being asked to speak on media as a social media specialist for like, and I thought it was actually kind of lazy for media. Like it was like, oh, Linda talks about social media, let's just ask her. And so I started to decline because I was like, I think you should actually spread the voices around. And so I think that thought could go with anything when we're talking about lifting up communities that are underrepresented in arts and culture or anything. It's just maybe not the first or obvious choice, or maybe this person is actually really great for it, but wow, they get a lot of jobs, or they're in every festival, or let's try to find someone else, is kind of my, I guess, thought process for that.
And for folks that maybe aren't in the space,
Yes.
how do we find these other folks?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so honestly, I know so many more, and this, I don't know if this sounds weird, I feel like I know so many more Black businesses, Black artists, Black people, just because because I started following Rochelle many years ago. And so just that simple act, so I'm gonna tie it back to social media.
Let's go there, right? Because that's where you're talking back to, is the role of social media.
Is that it's so incredible to me how we have access, this type of access, and of course there's negative things about social media, but on the positive side, we have this instant access to so many people. And from there, like I mentioned, the Vietnamese video that I see, if I like it, suddenly, there's good and bad about the algorithm, but suddenly I see another Vietnamese creator. And I think that's so cool. And so when I interact with Rochelle, now I'm getting, I saw something about Black snowboarding, for instance, because she posted something about that. So it's so easy now, I think, to expand your network. And so to go out of your way to do that is I intentionally follow Indigenous accounts, I intentionally follow Black artists, I intentionally follow Asian well, maybe Asians in my community anyways, but I'm going out of my way to find these people, and it's actually very easy because you just start clicking it and then it starts recommending it to you, really. And also Google is very, easy.
Fair point. On the social media piece, maybe I'm just gonna pass the question along. Rochelle, how has social media changed the landscape for you and the work that you're doing as well?
I think it allows you to tap into diverse audiences. So with Feed the Soul Dining Week, one thing that we do is we work with local content creators, and our mission is that we reach out to at least 50% of Black content creators and 50% of non-Black content creators. What that does is it puts Feed the Soul Dining Week on so many different feeds because of that algorithm. Someone was like, wow, Feed the Soul's everywhere. And I was like, yeah. But I think social media is where you can start to do those collaboration posts, where you can work with content creators that are not within your own community, where you can also do your own learning, which I think is a really big one. Learning about different cultures. Like maybe you need to send me some of these Vietnamese comedians.
I think you'd find them funny.
Using those opportunities. With the Dining Week, we actually leveraged the work of content creators in 2020 who had made lists. Linda was one of them. About Black-owned restaurants to support, and that's how we did our first mapping of the Black food and beverage community. As a group of volunteers, I'm always really proud to say I think we have the most data on what that community looks like, and there's actually over 80 businesses that we had done mapping when we did. We started in 2022, I want to say, 2023. So just by being able to go to different content creators who had done these lists. A lot of those businesses had closed down. There was new ones that had opened up, but it made us not have to start from ground zero.
Lana, anything to add on the social media front?
I'm a little slow when it comes to social media. I do like slow social media.
And there's a space for that too.
Yes. Only because there's just so much information, but I think it's really important as an educator that what I do share on social media is about education. It's about, again, what kind of medicine do I want to share about where I come from, about the communities I'm a part of, and Indigenous, giving that Indigenous light. So I definitely do use it. I'm just a little more slower pace. I do digital storytelling. I do little short YouTubes, and then I love watching. I definitely love Instagram because it's of the amount of
discovery.
And this is how I learn about Edmonton vibrant communities. And because of the event, we were one of my groups. My research work. We got one of the community your restaurants to cater our event.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, please.
I also think it's easy for everyone. So for instance, every week I send out a things to do or food to eat list, and part of that is literally I'm just Googling things. And there's so many things, but so for me it's I'm curating what am I picking. So I'm very intentional about, is there an underrepresented group event that I can publicize? And so even today I sent it out. I didn't realize that there was the annual, what was it called? Annual Jamaican Fish Fry that's happening this Friday. So I don't know if they're just using annual incorrectly and it's their first time doing it. Okay, this is literally the first time I'd ever heard of it, right? And so that I wonder, because I was looking to see if they had done previous Eventbrites, and this was the first Eventbrite that they had put it up. And I'm just that simple act of them putting this on Eventbrite has now opened this event up to so many people, and it's open to everyone. Anyone can go. So being intentional about, yes, I'm absolutely going to tell people about this Jamaican fish fry thing, whereas I could include, another Easter egg hunt type of thing, right? So it's just kind of being a bit more intentional about even what you're searching and then what you're choosing to, I'm going to go to that instead of, because there's so many events I think that are competing for our time. Yes. But but that click of I want to go to this because it's different and I want to support this group that maybe doesn't get as much love as the Easter Bunny.
Or something that's new for you.
Yeah,
too,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
To learn something new through this. hearing that throughout, whether it's who you follow and being intentional about that, but being intentional about events you're going to. We talked about social media, but also with that comes technology. You mentioned Eventbrite. We mentioned the online capacity, whether that's through communicating through Zoom or Google Meets or what platforms. And so I'm segueing a little bit off book here, but from a technology perspective, from when you started in your spaces to where we are now, the growth of AI, other Google platforms to choose to, I know ChatGPT can put a whole itinerary together, but I don't know if they're gonna have the same restaurants if I follow you two on there. So a bit of a leading question, but I'll kick it over to the group, whoever wants to take it first, in terms of where's tech leading us and positives, negatives, warning signs, anything to add?
I'll just mention, I work with our youth who are like our diverse sexual and gender kin, and the youth and their families. And so I think of data sovereignty. As a researcher, where is my information being stored? How are we sharing this? You know, some of our events and our research work. So I think of data sovereignty, I think of copyrights, I think of intellectual property, especially as Indigenous knowledge becomes more appropriated. So I think of those, like those kind of issues, and wanting to make sure that we're caring for our knowledge in a sense that it's a fine balance to think of how we promote and preserve as well, and protect our knowledge from being eaten by the beast of that I don't even know.
Yeah, big tech beast.
Yes.
I've tried to resist it for so long.
Like what? Technology?
Like the ChatGPT and all, yeah. I think it's just becoming more prevalent, even within my professional job. They're like, nonprofits need to be using AI. And I'm like, how? I don't have time to learn this. Like, it's just coming at us so quickly and so fast. So I think it's being really careful of how we are using technology, in what forms, the ability for people to opt in to what they're sharing. When I think about from an art perspective, like it's cool to be able to go get this new drawing that you can do with like the digital art. Obviously I don't know too much about it, but what does that do for local artists? And so if we're just doing these like free fun things, are we still paying local artists to create and to like put their art on our walls? So I think that it's great. I've definitely seen event descriptions that look identical. So I think you have to like learn to use it in ways that are, you know, brainstorming and like generative, but not like the end solution.
The final thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'd say, is that I think AI can really help you be more efficient, but that the thing that AI gives you shouldn't be the thing that you're now sharing to the public. And so even from an artist perspective, when you were saying how great would it be if artists didn't have to worry about money and they could just create, I do think like there's instances where AI could, you know, help an artist who doesn't know how to apply for a grant, like help them, you know, with that first stage. And then you're like, whoa, I feel, okay, I can like go back and I can change some things and I feel good about it. So I think there's definitely ways you can use tech and things like AI to help you, but it should always have that human eye before you like publish or you know, produce or sell or whatever.
You said human eye, and I was hearing Lana speak, and it's like, don't walk in blindly, because we have to ask these questions of ourselves, and same for you, Rochelle. So thank you for that. Rochelle, I'm going to turn to you. During tough economic times, how can we ensure that art and culture are supported?
What you did tonight, show up.
Bit of a softball. Turn it, Linda. Anything to add?
To elaborate. Yeah, I mean, and so I don't know if this is like a cliche thing, but if you can't show up because, you know, of the cost barrier or something like that, then like share the post, you know, to your page. Like even something like that, or interact with the company. Like again, like when I said that, all the organizers were probably like, yay, you know, people showed up. Like people on the internet, businesses on the internet are also like, yay, someone left a comment or someone sent this to a friend. Like that does signal positive things to them, and it's encouraging, and it makes them want to keep doing it and keep going, even if you're not, let's say, able to afford to go to all the festivals that are out there.
Because there's a lot to choose from now.
Yes.
Yeah. Lana, anything to add on that?
I mean, showing up, collaborating, making it's like, in one way, you want to make sure that you are able to go, so having free events, but at the same time, like, there is that, again, where do you still are making money, generating some funds, so you're paying the artists and paying, for food and welcoming people. So I think there's, call it rough times, but I think of, like, historically, of creating community is so important. So having that people coming together to share, this is one of our Cree laws of sharing, of coming in to build that, and hopefully, money will follow. But yeah, it's definitely challenging to be in spaces where people are struggling. So showing up is, again, just repeating.
Maybe just to dovetail with your comment here, and I'll go to you first, Rochelle, with this. Post-COVID world, how has that impacted arts, culture, community? And are we seeing, you mentioned it at the top, it feels like Edmonton's getting busier. Are we seeing an upswing, a trend change, a shift?
I think there is a shift. Like, there's more events that are happening in person, like today. I think people are getting a little bit tired of the virtual space, but virtual spaces are really important because they're accessible. There's people that can't show up and be here, so this is more of a hybrid event. And I think we need to think about what is the future. How do we create community for those that can't physically be with us? How do we create community where you were talking about walking in and feeling represented and feeling like you belong, just from, like, interacting with the space, not even interacting with another human being necessarily. I think that post-COVID, and I would say more like 2024, is thinking about having less expectations, I think, of organizers, because I would say there was a lot of money that was out there in 2020 to do Black-led festivals and events, and budgets are getting tighter and tighter, but the demand and, like, the expectation is higher and higher. So we're doing a lot more with less, and it's actually just, like, frankly, it's really challenging as an organizer. It's really challenging when you run social enterprises that are, like, volunteer driven too. When you're like, how am I going to, like, take the staff or the volunteers for a meal just to celebrate all the hard work that we did? So I think having less expectation and just going in with, like, a curious and open mind. Yeah, and just, like, Bonafide Media is, like, our media agent for Feed the Soul, and she's always like, be a gracious guest, be a gracious guest. And I think that's just something to, like, think about as you are in a space. Feedback is great. Like, we can't innovate and improve without feedback, but just think about the way that you're delivering that message in a way that's constructive and doesn't make people, like, want to be turned off from creating these spaces that you can enjoy.
No, thank you. Anything to add, Linda?
I was just going to add that I think maybe potentially there's way more angry people on the internet the last few years. I don't know the data, but probably. So just, I think that's been a change, is that, it's always been good as an organizer to what's our crisis comms plan, just in case, like, what would people complain about? Now it's like, wow, people can really complain about like anything. So as a person, it's like, it's like, hey, maybe you didn't need to say that. So kind of, or how are you saying it, or in what avenue are you saying it? So does that actually have to be a 1-star Google review or a public comment, or could you actually just send a private message if you honestly are, like, trying to be a decent person and just trying to, like, give you good feedback that you can incorporate, versus I'm just going to shit on you so everyone can see that. So yeah, I think maybe seeing more negativity, and then so kind of trying to dial that back a little bit. Or if you see it,
Call it out.
and you have the capacity, yes, call it out for them, because, like, the person behind that account is like, yes, someone else said it.
I've seen a few of those posts on your Instagram feed when you've called someone out, and I love it. Lana, anything to add in this space?
Again, I keep coming back to, like, how can we be better relatives? How can we create a culture of care? In one way, being in person is a way of protecting from those, but at the same time, you know, when you are doing hybrid or online, is definitely being open to violent reactions. And so how do we create a community of care to watch out for one another, right? And usually that is nurtured by personal relationships, by building those kind of, you know, caring relationships for another person, watching out for them, you know, because you know them. You know, you go eat together, you go to festivals together. And so watching out for one another is really important to contributing to building those kind of better relationships, I think, in person, but also online, and addressing it. Being that auntie, you know, don't mess around auntie, right, of taking care of one another and not having to be alone in that kind of negative space.
Really?
Also, like, seeing, I think, more barrier-free. So I have a barrier-free ticket, or
Even
can you
the
sponsor
event.
a ticket for someone else? I think that's something that I've seen that's really positive since starting this pandemic.
Yeah. You guys had that for your turn.
I'm gonna go out to the audience. And I see a question over here.
I just am curious, as you've been talking, I'm wondering, it's okay, I'll just talk about it.
I'll repeat it before they answer.
I'm wondering about how you see using art to engage, promote, or effect systems change, because I see that as kind of a really great way to start to challenge some of those kind of systems barriers and challenges that we all have and that we're all living with it. So I'm curious what your perspectives are on that.
So for folks in the hybrid model, and for us to all get a chance to think about this question, how are we using art to challenge those systems barriers, and where do you see that going?
I had this exhibition at the Art Gallery of Alberta last year on exploring the 13 moons, and one of the paintings was, it's called Leaf Changing Moon, which is October. And it's this old lady scraping hides in the river valley with Walter Dale Bridge in the background in the Edmonton cityscape. And then last year, it was incredible, because I think about systemic change, because I paint the community I want. I paint the world I want to live in, and my kids to live in, my grandkids and great-grandkids to live in. And so, so last year, there's this little piece of land called the Heartland, and again, talking about collaboration between the city and like university as a researcher, is we hosted a high tanning camp. And so this little piece of land in the river valley down by Kinsman, we were had this, you know, for our gender diverse kin, and we had our teepee set up, and we were scraping hides. And one of my matriarchs was like, "Lana, this is like your painting, right?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it is!" And we ended up giving a print of that painting to our J.D. Shine, who was leading that high tanning camp. But I'm like, this is, again, like that systemic change. But it happened because that I was already in conversations with the city of Edmonton with Indigenous initiatives of wanting to have land for land-based education that is inclusive for gender diverse folks. Like, let's have a space where we can set up a teepee in the city. You know, that, again, that visible representation where only, you know, if you're in that land, you know that you are connected to that space through memory making, right? Of engaging in land-based activities such as high tanning. We've had Esquelcomic, like rites of passage. And this is all happening in the heart of Edmonton for so many Indigenous, Indigiqueer folks. And, you know, and it's not something we brag about, or, you know, but it was something that, that ripple effect. Now we have youth who are like, I belong. This is where, you know, I do my high tanning. This is where we do ceremony. This is where, you know, Dwayne Donald takes his walks and teaches about the land, the historical. the history of this land, of the river, and that important lifeline for our city, that identity of our city, right, is that river. So it's kind of like there's layers to that. And it all begins again with those conversations of creating systemic change, because I was also part of the, with the Indigenous strategic framework that was implemented 2 years ago now. Yeah. So, and that's a systemic, part of that, making that change.
I think just building off of the city of Edmonton, like they have the Art of Inclusion framework, and they invited staff to submit pieces of art that are now embedded throughout that publication document. I participated in this gathering with a foundation through Tamarack, and we did, I don't know if you know Milani Goodchild, but she does these like really cool facilitation. So we created a metasage where we each got a prompt, and then we had to reflect about for 10 to 15 minutes, do self-reflection, but then as a small group we had to weave those stories together into like this tapestry of a poem that was like not only our own story, but it became a collective story. So I think thinking about in like the workplace and the work that I do professionally, how we can shift our facilitation for different modalities of learning, getting people. I actually went to Boston and did this really cool course, and they got us to develop our theory of change of like how we want to like shift the systems, but they said be creative and don't put words on the page. So I had to like talk about like the context for why equity is important and the outcomes we're hoping to achieve, and thinking about like our mission, like using pictures, and there was a lot of like people and happy faces, and we exist to end poverty in all forms, so we had a lot of like, I put like a money raining down on people, but I think just like challenging people to go into that creative part of their brain that they don't use often, can then tell a completely different picture, not trying to be a pun, but a different picture of what we would do if we were just using the power of language.
Beautiful.
I think the only thing I would add is that if you are not the artist yourself, what I see and think is really cool is that by supporting these artists, or by supporting, Indigenous artists, Black artists, and these underrepresented group artists in their work, that I feel like is already a form of resistance, because they're here and they're creating, and there was a time when the people in charge did not want them to be here. So I think that, again, as like a passive thing, is that, when you interact with and support and buy or show up to these events that artists are involved in, then that is sort of your act of resistance already towards the system. Keep doing it.
I like it. There's a question on this side of the room. Well, I'm still going to repeat it for the folks online.
Okay, so this is for everyone, all panelists. So in arts, community building, event building, oftentimes the harshest criticism will come from within the community that you're looking to represent. So how do you navigate that commentary where they say the event is too niche or too broad to represent that very community?
So in terms of, that was a long question, Charlotte, and I love it. In terms of what we just heard from Charlotte, community being its harshest critic, the community you're trying to represent being the harshest critic, how do you want to respond to that or speak to that in terms of experience, opportunities to grow? Anyone want to take this first?
I will. I think it's a reality, what you've mentioned. It's something that I've experienced. It's caused me to like go into my shell and needed to retreat, but it's also caused me to understand what my purpose and my why is. Why and who am I creating things for? Also understanding who's that system of support that's behind me, because people are going to criticize, like Linda's talked about all this like hate that you get from the outside space and social media and the online world. And people might criticize like in the WhatsApp groups, or they might tell you to your face. I think it's just figuring out who is your system of support. And when it gets really difficult, remembering why, but also remembering that rest is okay, and rest is really critical and crucial in this work. So that's how I kind of try and navigate it. It's not easy, like I think it's a struggle that I continue to be on, but I continue to try and show up at the same time.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I think think I would sort of reiterate that is just reminding yourself why you're doing it or what you're doing it for or what those outcomes are. And then also, you know, reminding yourself that the people that maybe are criticizing you, they don't know the context or they don't know the background. So they're criticizing maybe one facet of what they see on the surface level, but you might be really proud of that. And then at the same time, it's like not, no matter, I mean, I often will get criticized and I'll be like, well, that's stupid. But in my mind, I'll be like, but is it valid? So I might have like a gut reaction where I'm like, why are they criticizing? But I'll still try to, okay, well, but could that be improved or do they have a point? And then kind of work from that. But I think to Rochelle's point is like really understanding why you're doing it can ground sort of what your reaction and response and how hard you take it is going to be if you're pretty solid about the kind of that purpose.
I just thought of one more thing.
Yeah, get in here.
I remember someone was complaining when I was running Black Owned Market. They were complaining about, oh, this could be better, and da 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 da. And I was just like, okay. And I was listening. I was like rolling my eyes in my head. Maybe I was rolling them externally. Hopefully not. But I was like, oh, did you want to volunteer? And they didn't. So I took their feedback with a grain of salt. Yeah.
I work intergenerationally. When we talk about thinking in 7 generations, I place myself as being the bridge between my ancestors and my future, those not yet born. So in thinking of that, again, that kinship system of, from an Indigenous worldview we call Wako to Win, is I work simultaneously being guided by my elders, but I'm also grandma, so I talk to my granddaughter, right? And I'm constantly working within that intergenerational connections, and I'm guided by them. So when I'm doing a lot of work, and definitely there's a lot of lateral violence, so I'm cognizant of being trauma informed, but I'm also violence informed, right? And seeing how much of this reaction is trauma and how much of it is violence informed, right? And what are the roots of that? And so it always brings me to a very humble position, right? Because usually those who are most violent are those who are most disconnected. Those are the ones who want to be involved, but not volunteer, you know? And so it's like, thinking of that, I always like take a bird's eye view, an eagle eye view of where, like looking at patterns and patterns of behavior, which is really hard to see on social media, right? So hence why I take it really slow. And so making sure that I check in with my elders. We always start in ceremony. I did this right. An example is, I used to host medicine walks with one of my aunties in the River Valley, and we'd charge $35 for people to take it for 3 hours to come and hang out with my auntie, who's like a medicine woman and a deadly Cree auntie. Like, it's awesome. And it was one of our community members who complained, why do we have to pay for culture? Why do I need to go to the city to learn this, da 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 da. There was like, it was just, and then, so we're like, we'll offer you to come for free. Like, you can come. You just need to send us a message letting us know if you need that. And we did. They didn't show up, right? So you create these opportunities to address those kind of behaviors in a sense. And if they don't follow up, then you know it's just, you know, a reaction that is probably trauma-based, right? I'm much more busier with all my research and my business, and I don't do enough art. But yes, I do, but no, I don't, not very often. Yes.
I think we have time for one more question.
So as a community organizer myself, I love hearing all of the call outs to grassroots movements, to building something yourself. One of the things that I'm particularly cognizant of is, or like that I'm always worried about though, is, okay, I'm doing lots of these things at the grassroots level, but am I changing the system? And I was wondering if you could speak to how we change the system so that the rules are easier for us to introduce art and culture into our spaces, so we're not constantly fighting.
So there's this displacement between culture and the system, and how can we change that system to be able to really open up this space for arts and culture?
Yeah. And not just as like the little guys, like.
One, you have to move at the speed of trust, right? Like this, and I say this in the context of truth and reconciliation. You know, of being, you know, a colonized, for my people, my family, being colonized for the past 4 or 5 generations in Treaty 6 area, and thinking of, even in my lifetime, of, you know, my mom ran away from an Indian residential school, had me, and where it was illegal to practice, you know, being Indigenous. It was illegal to be dressed. And this was only like 50 years ago, and less than 50 years ago. I'm the first generation of my my Whiskey Jack family to finish high school, go to get degrees, right? And now my Uncle Francis has a doctorate degree, so we, you know, we're thinking. But it's like thinking of that kind of individual change and how it impacts the macro is like, now my uncle is part of the Elders Council or Advisory for City of Edmonton, you know, and there is lots of work still to be done. But moving at a speed of trust really means moving at the speed of those creating those quality relationships, right? And to impact those systems. And I think of, you know, what is happening in our political landscape right now, especially with our gender and sexual diverse kin, right? I'm like, oh, so much work that has been done. How do we change that? And it's about, again, coming back to our theme of showing up, voting, asking questions, going knocking in person on those doors, and you know, bringing and supporting and creating those kind of communicating and advocating. It's a lot of work, and it can lead to burnout, which we often, of course, as community members and innovators and leaders do. But I think it's really important to, again, taking that bird's eye view of how much has changed and how much where in those communities can we bring our energy to support. And it's usually, you don't have to look further than the most vulnerable or those who are underrepresented to go see how our communities are treating those communities as well, to go and support and make some change. But yes, systemic change is a big tangled mess.
Big topic. Linda, anything to add?
I think I was thinking about it even less from a like kind of heavy systemic change, but I just think, again, if we're repeating the showing up part, like something so small that I did years ago was I did a guide for dog-friendly patios. And at the time that was rare. It was like, wait, we can bring our dog to these patios. And then, I'm not saying the blog is the thing that led to this change, but I like to think that one person's little thing that they do triggers something for others. And there's enough of this community reaction where like 3 years later, the process used to be quite involved. If you were a restaurant, you had to talk to Alberta Health Services, they had to come down, you had to fill out a bunch of forms. So there's all of these like barriers for that. And then, but because more and more people now were, oh, this place is dog friendly, I'm gonna check if this place is, why isn't this place? There was more of that discussion. Now any restaurant can have a dog friendly patio. You don't actually have to fill out any forms, you just have to make sure that you're following these rules. And it's like, well, why wasn't that what it was to begin with? So just like as a really small, you know, it's not like, we're not talking about like vulnerable people or like racism in that sense, but I just think it's a good example of you as the person that's doing something, that's the thing that might bring the change. And that visibility, I think about Karen, you know, being a racialized woman in politics, and it's like that is one way, absolutely, that she's making changes to the system. And then I like to think that when I'm calling out, you know, things on the internet, that is another way that you're changing the system slowly, but I think surely. And then if anything, it's at least planting the seed in more people to try and do a little bit. And then I think just enough of the little bit will hopefully topple some things, but.
No, I appreciate that. Rochelle, do you want to close us out on this?
Yeah, I'll try to do it quickly. So this is Tamarac's like bread and butter. One word I'm thinking of is multi-solving. So I know you're focused on like gender equity in tech, for instance. So how can you get into like a gender equity space, but do it across sectors so that you are thinking about gender equity from a broader perspective? You're getting different experiences and narratives that you didn't consider, and then it's going to inform how you approach your projects. But collective action, like movements need a collective body to move forward. And so at Tamarack, we believe in local place-based solutions to enact systems change. And we do that by convening tables and people who have a similar interest. And once we understand what those interests are, then we have a policy branch that will do advocacy at the federal level. So if anyone wants to learn more about that, come talk to me, because that could be like a whole hour-long talk on its own.
I think it's a great place to close, and thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Lana, so much for what you shared. We talked about storytelling at the beginning of all of this, about that art, that culture, that beautiful, vibrant city we all desire to see. You're all busy creating these spaces, and so I want to commend you for the work you've done, the work you continue to do. And for all of you out here, call to action. Let's keep showing up. Let's keep showing up for our community. Let's keep finding ways to be there. And thank you for showing up today. So we're going to give you all some time to continue to communicate, eat some more food. But just before we do that, we do have a quick thank you gift. Ariza's coming up, Maria's coming up for our panelists. So thank you so much. And perfect. Thank you. So with that, round of applause for everybody. Please stay, please mingle, please enjoy yourselves in this community we've created. Be intentional today and be kind to yourselves. Thank you for coming. Beautiful job.
Thank you so much. Great questions.
Did good. You guys did good.